We gotta put the laws in place to stop these secret societies, Joe! My name is I'm a warehouse worker at Amazon.
What's up, everyone? I'm coming to you from Washington, D.C., where you can just randomly yell at the White House and get what you want. I won't be discussing politics today. I'm here to document a little-known location made famous by the real-life Hannibal Lecter. Born here in Washington, D.C., and one of America's most prolific serial killers by the name of Albert Fish. Special shout out to my sister-in-law Megan and her husband James for getting me this new lapel mic that was much needed for all the background noise I've been experiencing on all my videos. Today's video isn't for the squeamish. If true crime isn't your thing, or if you have children in the room, you may want to skip this video. But if you think you're ready for this nightmare fuel, it's all ahead on Hollywood for Ugly People. Let's do this. Now, Albert Fish was born in Washington, D.C. on May 19, 1870 as Hamilton Howard Fish. He had three siblings, Walter, Annie, and Edwin. Albert's father, Randall Fish, was 75 years old when Albert was born. He was 43 years older than Albert's mother, Ellen. When Albert was 5, his father died, and his mother feared that she wouldn't be able to take care of him, so she put him in St. John's Orphanage here in D.C., or St. John's Orphan Asylum as it was called at the time. While at the orphanage, Fish was abused and tortured, but that's where he learned to enjoy pain. He was once quoted as saying, "I was there until I was nearly 9. That's where I got it all wrong." We were unmercifully whipped. I saw boys doing many things that they should not have done. That place ruined my mind. Now, in 1880, Fish's mother got a decent job working for the government, and she was able to save Albert from the orphanage. But the damage had already been done. By the age of 12, he was dating a boy who introduced him to things like drinking urine and eating feces. In 1919, he stabbed a mentally handicapped boy here in Georgetown. Georgetown isn't too far from here. If you take a left and go out that way, it's only a few miles in that direction. The Fish family had a history of mental illness. His uncle had mania, his brother was sent to a mental hospital for reasons unknown, his sister was diagnosed with an unknown mental affliction, and 3 other family members were also diagnosed with illnesses. It wasn't until 1890 that Fish moved to New York City, where at that point he became a prostitute and continued to rape young boys as he had here in D.C. Fish actually got married at one point. In 1898, he married a woman 9 years younger than him, and he had 6 children. The same year, he became a house painter and would use his career as a gateway to molest young children, mainly boys under the age of 6. He had a thing for kids. A few years later, in 1917, Albert's wife left him and his kids, and after his wife walked out on him, he began to self-harm. He started to embed needles into his groin and abdomen. He was x-rayed at one point. He had at least 29 needles inserted in his pelvic region. He had a nail-studded paddle that he would regularly beat himself with and said he enjoyed the feeling of blood running down his legs. He would never beat his children, but always asked if they wanted to beat him with the paddle. This guy was sick and twisted. And after a few months, he developed an obsession with cannibalism and even got his kids to try it. And there it is, St. John's Church. Much of the area has changed, but it was built in 1815, and it's the oldest building in Lafayette Square other than the White House. Every sitting U.S. president since James Madison has attended services there at least once. And the church's bell was built in 1822 by Paul Revere's son, Joseph Revere. So the orphanage is long gone, but there's a picture floating around online that I'll try to put on here. A second location was later built on a larger lot on the southeast corner of 14th and S Streets, I think, northwest. And the original location here was torn down, but the church remains. Now, if this church looks familiar, it may be because it's seen its fair share of news coverage in the past couple of years. Every president of the United States since President James Madison has attended occasional services here. Many of them were communicants of the parish. This building was completed in 1816 from plans of Benjamin Henry Latrobe. Now, I can't tell the orientation of the church where the orphanage once stood. As a matter of fact, from looking at the picture, I can't even tell that there was a church attached to it. But the fact remains, this place has changed quite a bit since Albert Fish was here. But this is it. Lafayette Square is right across the street. This is the parish house at 1525. I think we're on H Street. I think that's where it is. Parish house. So you can see it says Ashburton House, National Historic Landmark. It was made a landmark in 1974, but this building looks like it's been here for a lot longer than that and is attached to St. John's Church. But this is where Albert Fish started his reign of terror before he went up to New York. We'll get into that story here in a few minutes, but we've got one more location to go scout out. So I'm in Congressional Cemetery in southeast D.C. It's only about 3 miles from the White House where we once were, and this cemetery is massive. Already I can tell I'm going to have to come back here and do an entirely separate video on this because there are some fairly well-known people buried here that I know that I'm interested in but have nothing to do with this video. So I'll do that at a later time. It's always interesting as someone who's doing these videos to walk around amongst other people who have no idea what you're doing, looking at you talking to a camera, and then you do a video like this about a serial killer and talk about some of the really sick and twisted things that he did while talking to a camera and no one knows what you're doing, and talking about some of the crimes and horrific things that he was doing in front of these people. So I feel a little bit more relaxed in doing that here as I'm looking for Randall Fish, the father of notorious American serial killer Albert Fish. Everything around here is so old that a lot of the markers are worn off, and so I'm having a bit of trouble finding it, but we'll see what we can do. I've never moseyed, so we're just going to kind of mosey down this pathway and talk a little bit about Albert Fish and why there's interest in him today. The author of The Silence of the Lambs actually based Hannibal Lecter on an entirely different serial killer, but in my opinion, if there were any serial killer to base Hannibal Lecter off of, it would be Albert Fish. I don't know any of the crimes that he's committed to have been committed so heinously and sick and twisted as Albert Fish. So a little bit of background on Albert. We know he was born here. We know he was in St. John's Orphanage or St. John's Asylum in Lafayette Square. He's known for a series of murders. But before he committed any murders, he was known basically just for grand larceny. He was a thief. And he was just a creep. He sent obscene letters to women. He was severely beaten when he was younger. And according to him, that led to his acting out as an adult. Because he was beaten so severely as a kid, he became immune to pain. and actually started enjoying the pain. So anything that I could find online basically said that there was really no ritual that Fish followed with his victims. It was never official, but it became kind of a reoccurring theme that he would rape young boys but never girls. This guy was just sadistic and twisted, and he preferred his victims to be either African American or mentally ill. In 1919, he stabbed a mentally handicapped boy in Georgetown. That boy survived, and I couldn't really find much about that boy or what happened to him after. He had devices that he liked to use when he was torturing people. He called them the implements of hell, and it consisted of a meat cleaver, a butcher knife, and a handsaw. So there you go. Fish had several other encounters with other young men and women and other crimes and arrests, but really he's more known for the killing and cannibalism of Grace Budd, a little girl named Grace Budd. So at the age of 58, Fish traveled to the Budd residence where he met the family under a false identity. He called himself Frank Howard. He claimed he wanted to hire Edward and his friend as well. He told Edward that he would send for him, but never showed up, and promised to return and take him himself. He intended on making Edward his initial victim before Grace, but changed victims and focused his attention on Edward's younger sister, which was Grace. He told the family that he had to go to his niece's party and he wanted Grace to accompany him so she would also enjoy the party, as his fictional niece was also Grace's age. So Albert, under the name Frank, or whatever he was going by, decided to say, oh no, I have a niece and she'll be at the party and Grace would love to meet her and play with her. Well, needless to say, the family said, yeah, sure, and Grace was never seen again. So Fish essentially took Grace to a house in New York, and there have been other videos done about that particular house. That house is still standing, has been renovated, and I believe somebody's living there. I'm not quite sure, or maybe it's still for sale. But after a few days, Fish decided that he was going to cut Grace up into little pieces, and he ate her. That was his thing. Now, Fish was subsequently caught. That's a whole other story, but all we need to know right now for the purposes of this one is that Fish was caught. Fish was caught. You like that? Yeah, that was good. I just came up with that. So Howard Fish was caught and sent to Sing Sing, where he was pretty boastful about his crimes. He used to talk about how he would kill his victims, how he would cook them and eat them, and how he preferred them with spices or carrots or whatever else. He got very descriptive. He wrote a letter to his attorney at the time to be read later, and his attorney later said, no one will ever see this letter, because he just thought the letter was just too descriptive and too sick and twisted. Albert Fish never really was sorry for his crimes or apologized to victims' families, nothing. He was unrepentant. Albert also killed and cut up his first wife. I forget her name now, but she was subsequently found after he was arrested. Fish was ultimately executed at Sing Sing prison and buried in their cemetery. What I was able to do is line up that wall that you see in the back with that house right behind it to find Randall Fish's grave. Now, probably not the best way to do it, but really was the easiest. This is a 70-acre cemetery. So I would have been out here all day searching for this, but I'm going to pan back over here and I will show you Albert Fish's father, Randall Fish, his final resting place. Randall Fish died 1875, and I'll just kind of pan up here a little bit. Maybe the way that is, maybe the way it was taken was from back here, and I can't really see it all that well now, but back here, and then there's that house in the background. That's how I was able to find Randall Fish. Now, shout out to my friends in the Grim Life Collective on their YouTube channel. They have an entire video about Albert Fish from the New York, New Jersey perspective. They visit Fish's mother's grave and the house that I was just speaking about. So I'll put the link below. Hopefully I can remember, but I'll put the link below in case you want to see that video. Again, shout out to them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.